Okay. My clock says that it's 1:45. So if it's okay, I will introduce you. Folks, thanks awful much for your patience. Sorry about the timing. It wasn't quite seamless from AGM into Stewart's talk. I'm delighted to welcome Stewart Collins, VP of Experience in Design Small Businesses from Sage, to come and talk with you this evening. Stuart and I were talking earlier prior to the AGM. He's been with Sage since 1989 in one guise or another. So I think a long service medal as well as coming to talk with us is deserved. Stuart's going to talk with us about embedding design principles and in particular how that's been implemented, looking at transforming Sage Accounting. Stuart's going to talk for about half an hour or so, and then we'll have questions at the end. So without any further ado, I'm going to get rid of my camera and hand over to Stewart. Thank you.
Hi, Alistair. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening and to be able to share a little about the journey that we've been on at Sage over the last few years as we move towards becoming a design-first or experience-first company. I suppose one of the things we should probably do first of all is try and talk about what we mean by design. So when we talk about design, we're not just talking about the user interface and the design in our products. We're talking about using design and techniques like design thinking, which I'll talk about in a little while, as a way to help everyone in Sage innovate, no matter what their role, whether they be in finance or the people department or building products. And to quote Steve Jobs, design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is also how it works. And why is design important to Sage? Well, we live in a world now where actually, more accurately, we have lived in a world for quite a while where the customer has more flexibility, much more power in the choices they make, and they can easily find new solutions that they might be interested in. So with the power of Google, you can very quickly find lots of accounting software in the market. And in fact, on this particular Google search, Sage was number 2, which doesn't bode well. But it's very obvious that customers can move between these. In the past days, you'd have to install software, you'd have to go get that software from a vendor, you'd buy it from a store, you'd install it, you'd probably spend quite a lot of money in that investment, and therefore changing between products was something you didn't really do. But today you can try many different products in the space of a few hours. So from our perspective, we have to win customers, and we have to win them over every day. From the moment they land on our marketing site, we have to route them to the right solution. And once they've found that solution, we have to earn the right to keep them. And that means following them through their sign-up journey, ensuring they get the most out of a demo. They probably go to start a trial, and hopefully, of course, they ultimately become a customer and pay for the service. But that's not the end of the journey. We also have to continue to demonstrate value so that we can retain them as a customer for the long term. And it's user experience that we provide that will form a large part of their decision to stay with Sage or simply move to the next product in their Google search. So the role of design, and in particular user experience, is central to what we now do to deliver in our vision of becoming a great SaaS company. But it wasn't always like this. So as Alistair said, I've been with Sage a little while. So let's have a little bit trip back in time and sort of go back to a prior period. Oh, I've gone too far. So actually, perhaps I'll stay here for a second. As you can see, I joined a company that ultimately Sage acquired in September 1989, 1 year after I finished my GCSE. And my GCSE project is not actually obvious here. I've taken a bad photo, but that project and all that printer paper you can see there is actually an invoicing system for a small business. So you could say I've been eating McDonald's and building invoicing software or accounting software for pretty much more than 31 years. But anyway, enough about that. Let's quickly move forward again and get a bit nearer time. So In 2013, having been with Sage for many years and having worked in various different products, including things like Sage 50, I decided that it was time to make the switch to cloud. And the world was very different. What we call today is experience design, back then was almost unheard of. There was no real formal process. There were some customer engagement events, but not many. And there was little user experience or interaction design. It hadn't always been like that, but we had definitely lost our way a little. In fact, when I look at the team that we had at the time, there was only one person with a job title that had anything to do with user experience, and that was a usability specialist. We did have some people with the word designer in their job title, but they focused at that time on making the application look, well, I guess you could say they focused on making it look pretty. So pretty, in fact, that for some reason we decided to display a Sage logo on all the reports that were produced, including the customer's profit and loss and balance sheet. And actually, if I think back, we also chose to make it a rather nice shade of pastel yellow, which I guess made the Sage logo show up better because it was green. But of course, when the customer printed that, they got through lots of toner and ink. And there was another thing as well. If you had to work out how to make your printer print a US letter document on A4 paper. So can you imagine turning up to a meeting with your bank manager and showing them a company profit and loss statement with a big green Sage logo on it? No, neither could I. And it turns out that was really a bad thing to do. So in reality, there's a difference between what we call a UX designer and a UI designer. So UX designers focus on the user's needs, basing their work on the principles of human-centered design, producing wireframes, prototyping, understanding the tasks that customers complete, and identifying the key scenarios that they're trying to do in their business. They also look at things like how should information be organized, the structure of an application, the way in which users navigate and to find and process the information they need. Whereas a UI designer, or what we would call a visual designer today, and the only type of designer we really had in Sage 1 at that time, was far more focused on what Sage wanted, how our brand was represented, what typography or color palette we were using. Therefore, it's not really a surprise that we weren't clearly thinking very much about the customer and something had to change. It wasn't all bad. We had the start of a design system, so some basic patterns for reporting, how entry forms should work, and we had some patterns for how you should display lists. But these were mostly delivered through what I would call a heavyweight composite component. So effectively many controls put together in a way that you can't move and you can't change, and they're extremely inflexible in nature. On the other hand, they're great for consistency. We found that people could use the application quite quickly, but then everything the user was trying to do had to fit into one or two of these patterns. And that didn't really matter what customer problem we were trying to solve, or whether it made sense to actually do that. Now, in the desktop world that I'd come from, we struggled to embrace UX as a skill and a talent, and we also found that there were a lot of constraints. So Microsoft would set standards for how Windows applications would work. Our UI technology in Sage 50 would make it harder to render the designs that we wanted. And there was also a certain amount of apathy with the developers who didn't really understand who these people were that were turning up, telling them how to change their application. And you can imagine the outcome. With Sage 1, we knew we had to be different. The constraints of the desktop were no longer applicable. And with some effort and attention to detail, it was possible to render designs in a pixel-perfect way. So we started to build a team, bringing a few individuals from inside Sage together and hiring UX talent from outside of the business. We also recognized that we had to be extremely close to other colleagues, such as business analysts. And over time, those business analysts evolved and became what we call today a solution designer, where their role is a combination of business analyst, domain expert, and part product owner. They tend to own features and see them through the delivery, all the way through from design to user interaction design, into engineering, through QA, and they support the product management team. So I kind of touched on it briefly, but while we have a very strong skill set in experience design, we also depend heavily on colleagues in engineering and product management. Because after all, it's no good of us coming up with great designs that are impossible, or in some cases too expensive to build. So anyway, fast forward a couple of years, and we grew from that team of 5 to a team of 17. And that took a lot of convincing internally in Sage for us to start to take design seriously, and a lot of recruitment. And we actually started to make a difference. So I've got a short video that I'm going to try and play, and I apologize, the audio may not be great, but the video is really a highlight of where we the work we did in 2017, and you'll see some of the changes that we managed to enact. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, so apologies, that's quite a fast-moving video, but hopefully give you a bit of a flavor of some of the changes that we were able to instigate when we started working more closely with customers, and also applying a more simplistic design and decluttering some of the forms, and helping users complete tasks more efficiently. By now it's 2017, so just 3 years ago, and I have to remind myself often that it is just 3 years ago. The change that we've seen in Sage and in how seriously design has been taken is quite dramatic. And of course, Sage aren't the only company that are using design as a way to drive innovation and quality. And I was looking at this slide earlier thinking, I wonder how many people will have used some of these brands and how many of these brands I've used personally. And it turns out I've used them all. And it also turns out that this presentation was written on an Apple Mac using Google Slides while sitting in a Herman Millen chair and drinking an awful lot of Starbucks over the last couple of days. And also that as I look out the window at my BMW that I probably won't get to drive for a little while longer. But these brands are all iconic, and they're all there using design to drive better outcomes for their business and their customers. So we formed in 2017, we started to take experience, what we call now experience design, very seriously. We created a function within the business that works across product teams. It works across segments as well. So it's not just a small business segment. My responsibility is small business, but I have colleagues who are responsible for the medium segment in Sage. And we also have a team that work on the marketing side and .com. But I thought it was just worth running through a few of the principles that we set out in 2017 as to what would guide us in how we worked and how we solve problems for our customers. So the first one is our customers are our guiding light. So we have to have deep empathy with our customers. We have to take the time to understand their goals and the outcomes they're trying to achieve. We don't support speculation. Customer feedback is critical to our success. We insist on data to try and make decisions rather than just people's views and thoughts. Everyone's allowed to be part of the process. Everybody can have an idea, but we have to make sure we get to the best ideas and work hard to embrace our customers in the design process, iterating as fast as possible to find optimum solutions. And I talked before about design thinking, which may be something you haven't heard of. So I'll just take a few moments to walk through what design thinking is and how it works. And there are quite a few different models, but they all kind of boil down to these 5 key themes, if you like. So the first theme is empathy. How do you empathize with your users? What do they think or feel? What are they afraid of? What dreams do they have? What do they hear when you talk to them? Who influences them? What do they see? What do they say or do? What's the attitude towards their job? Do they enjoy it? Do they not? Or actually, what's the attitude towards your product? And also, what's the typical day look like for them? Before COVID, we actually would go out and visit customers in their workplaces and see what they did on a day-to-day basis. And if you've never done this and you're responsible for a product in some form, I'd recommend you do it as soon as circumstances allow. It's something you just have to take time to do. I've never failed to learn anything from a customer engagement or a customer visit. The next phase is about define. So during the define stage, you take the information that you've put together from the empathy stage and you analyze those observations and try and synthesize them in order to create the core problems that you and the team are going to work on. And create an actionable problem statement, which is usually called the point of view. A point of view is usually based on deeper understanding of specific users, their needs, and their insights about them. In the design thinking process, you use those insights in field work from emphasize mode. The actual point of view should never contain a specific problem, nor should it contain an indication of how you're going to solve a problem. Instead, it should be wide enough scope for you and the team to be able to start thinking about solutions that go beyond the status quo. Once you've got your point of view, you start to look at an ideate phase. And the ideate phase is there for people to challenge all the assumptions and create as many innovative ideas and solutions as you can. And one way in which we do that is to ask questions that we phrase, how might we? So how might we enable our customers to not only survive, but thrive? How might we improve the way things work and operate for our customers? How might we remove data entry altogether? How might we use technology, whether that be something like artificial intelligence or machine learning, to automate finances and as much as possible reduce time a business owner needs to spend? Because after all, most of our customers didn't get into business to do bookkeeping, unless of course they're an accountant, in which case we need to consider their needs too. So how might we give them insights into their clients? How might we improve collaboration between the client and the accountant? How might we keep them up to date with know your customer checks that they have to complete? And once you've got a series of those how might we statements, you then start to come up with prototypes and mock-ups that you're going to use and test with customers. Now, a prototype in this stage can be as simple as somebody drawing on a piece of paper. It could be something a bit more advanced. So at Sage, the design team tend to like to produce what we would call a high fidelity mock-up. And that high fidelity mock-up looks pretty close to what the final product might look like. And that has pros and cons. So from our perspective, it creates a really good impression of what we're intending to do. And sometimes from the customer's perspective, it looks like you've spent a lot of time and effort in doing it, and they don't quite give you the feedback you want in terms of they're not honest. They don't want to hurt your feelings. So we often spend a lot of time or a few minutes at the beginning, of an engagement to just explain, really, this took no time at all. It's really quick, and we even do some changes live to show them how easy it is. But that's to encourage them to give us better feedback. But like I say, prototyping can be anything from a sketch on a piece of paper to something that's an interactive design that you can play with. And then, of course, the final part of the design thinking process is test. So test those solutions with customers, see how they interact with them, learn from them. Now, I've drawn this at the moment as a kind of linear process. And for those of you that understand terms like waterfall, it looks like you have to go from one to the other. But actually, design thinking is not a linear process. So what actually happens is you will move between these phases as you provide more information. So for instance, the prototypes that you put out in front of, as you start to build the prototypes, they might challenge some of the ideas that you had and cause you to go back and have new ideas or spend more time back at the ideation phase. The testing of those prototypes will often send you back to new ideas as well. A customer will give you some information that you hadn't perhaps picked up earlier on. So you'll go back and you'll do ideation. It also might cause you to redefine the problem you thought you were trying to solve. And that's something which, it gets a little bit frustrating, but as you move between these, but not as bad as actually getting to the end, testing it, learning you've got it all completely wrong. But this is the time to find that out. Finding it out at this stage is one of the cheapest times to do it, because once we get past test and we go into engineering, that's when it gets expensive. So the more we can do during this design thinking process to define the problem, provide a prototype, test with a user, and be confident that we're building the right thing, that saves money. So there's plenty of material on design thinking available, and I've really only scratched the surface in the time that we have here. But it's certainly something that I would recommend that you look at. And it's also something that can be applied to lots of things other than software engineering or user experience design. To give you a bit of an example of what some of the insights we've had in the past. So very early on in Sage Accounting, if you wanted to view an invoice, you would often end up back in the edit screen. So if the customer wanted to go and look at the details, they would come back to the screen that looked a bit like this, and they would be put into edit mode. Now that's really dangerous, because if they happen to type something by mistake and hit save, that change would be applied. So one of the things we got from some user testing sessions was, how could we improve this so that customers didn't have a damp head, didn't risk corrupting their data and changing their data. And we came up with a view page. So effectively, this gave us an opportunity to allow the customer to focus on viewing data. There's no danger of them making a change to this invoice without hitting the edit button, which is a very clear, distinct action. They can obviously do other tasks from this page as well. So they can create a copy, they can print it, they can email it. And there were a few other things that we hid underneath the more button that were less common. But using this design, putting this into production with customers and then measuring the interaction with those options quickly got us to a point where things in the move box, or the more box, sorry, were being accessed more often than we thought. So we thought they were infrequent. It turns out that customers started to want to do them more and more. So we iterated on the design and actually changed something like this. So this was within the same kind of time frame. A couple of months later, we brought out this new version of Invoice View. And as time's gone on and we've spoken to customers more and more, we've found that we need to continue to iterate further. And we discovered more and more things we can do. So that screen has now evolved to something like this. And this is the screenshot was taken today to make sure that it was the current one. And you'll see there's quite a few new elements in here. So customers weren't happy about not knowing when invoices had been sent or arrived. So we came up with this timeline that shows clearly what's the state of this invoice. Has it been created? Has it been sent? Has it been viewed? Has the customer paid it? We also introduced the ability to take card payments directly in the application. And as you'll see at the bottom, the number of things you can now do with this document has grown further. We've added in the ability to create a recurring transaction. We've added the ability to attach a file. So we had a customer who sells drawings for floor plans for buildings, and that's his job. So one of the things he said to us was, look, I'd love to send the floor plan with the invoice from the software, and now I don't have to worry about keeping a record of which floor plans went to which customers. So actually, when you get an invoice from this customer now, you'll get an invoice for the work and you'll get an attachment, which is the drawing that he's done for you. So we've continued to iterate this. Most of the changes on here are customer feedback led rather than just us. In fact, I think all the changes are customer feedback led. And you can now do a lot more with just an invoice screen than you could do before, and you can do it safely. So moving on to other principles that we have. So simple to get started, impossible to outgrow. So we strive to design an awesome first-time use experience where we aim to return value to our customers as quickly as possible. And this is something we're focusing on actually in our FY21, which we're just starting now. But there are things that we've done over the years that we thought were the right thing to do, but it turns out they weren't. So we're now reviewing every question we ask a customer as they sign up for the product to make sure it's delivering value to them and we're returning value to them as quickly as possible. And trying to work out what are the things that customers do. So for accounting, it's probably that first time they create an invoice, or maybe they don't do invoicing. Maybe they're a cash-based business and it's about recording expenses. For payroll, first time use would be how quickly can I get an employee set up and get their first payslip processed. For accountants, it's probably about onboarding a client and how soon can they set up things like reminders for key tax dates. Our aim is to guide customers at every step to help them unlock the benefits of the ecosystem, whether that be features in the product, or perhaps they're want to use a mobile application, or maybe they want to use one of the third-party developers that we have who will add more functionality to their product offering. So we design beautiful seams. This is something that a company like Sage has had to spend a lot of time thinking about, and we still have work to do. So we borrow and use technology from across different teams in the business. So our IT team provide all of our billing systems. We have a team internally which we call Service Fabric, who provide shared services for things like banking data, identity, payments, and compliance reporting. Now, our goal is to not be hampered by the fact we have different internal organizational structure. And what we shouldn't do is expose that to our customers. So our customers should just see Sage. They should just see banking information. What they shouldn't see is something that we internally call Banking Cloud, or potentially even something called Sage ID. So we aim to design seamless, integrated end-to-end experience that bring together data and technology to delight our customers. We take the time to map out the customer journey, understand their pain points, understand what delights them, and rather than starting with a replica of the existing product or just what we did last time, every time we integrate a new service, it's an opportunity to learn and to improve things for customers. Establishing iconic ownable moments. So we look to try and create touch points within the product and outside the product that customers can actually kind of get a buzz from. So some examples of this would be the first time you took a photograph of a receipt and you see it processed into a transaction using auto entry. So literally turning paper into digital data and meaningful data right before your eyes. Or maybe it's when you're sat in the pub on a Friday night and your Apple Watch pings to let you know that that big customer has just agreed the quote you sent them, and you can buy a round. But we know that a brand is a promise made and a promise kept, and we look to build these experiences in our applications, because the more ownable moments you create, the more customers connect with the software you're doing, the more you delight them, the stickier they become. So moving on, number 5, we are all systems designers. So no one is an island. We take a pattern approach to design where there are common jobs or tasks. We will use common designs and components. This is something that has taken us a while to really get to grips with. And if you are a user of Sage Accounting, you're probably sitting there going, that's not right, Stuart, you don't do that. But it's something we're moving to. So we've experimented quite a lot with, we're now getting to some good solid patterns that are starting to be repeated. And we've also started to contribute to what we call the Sage design system. And this is publicly available. So if you want to go and have a look and see what we do on the site, you will be able to, I believe, from Friday, because I think it's being updated at the moment. But the design system site contains everything from simple things like colors, fonts, layout, to the components that we use in our component library, which are the building blocks that our applications are built from. There's also design patterns that talk about how to take those building blocks and components and composite them to solve common user problems. And also, we obviously have a section on content. So it's important that the way we talk to customers, the tone of voice and the wordings that we use is consistent across our products and applications. Until early this year, the design system was largely being created and maintained as an additional role for our designers. This meant progress was much slower than we want. So back in April, we actually assigned dedicated resource to continue to work on the design system and grow it. But it's not, XD for us is a team sport. So it's not just those guys that are going to work on the design system. All of the segments will contribute back for things that are important to them. And I mentioned components before. So we actually have a component library in Sage, which we call Carbon. And this has been open sourced so that our third-party ISVs can use it to build solutions that look very similar to Sage and to help blend seamlessly into our products and services. At the moment, this is based on React, but there is also an Angular version too. And being open source, we actually get contributions from other parts of the other people as well outside of Sage. And there's quite one or two people who have contributed quite a lot back to the system. So design, as I touched on before, it's not a department. So yes, XD exists in Sage, or experience design exists in Sage as a function, but it is a team sport. So we take design and use it across all parts of the business. And let's say we aim to make user-centered design everyone's responsibility and nurturing design thinking across all business units and functions. And a few months ago, Sage actually started to run internally what we call a product excellence course, which is open to, as far as I know, anybody who wants to join. And that course has a number of sessions that are all around design thinking. In XD itself, we hold what we call design huddles. So these are a safe space where designers meet every 2 weeks with the entire department, and everyone is invited along to do critique. So to provide feedback on the designs that they see, make suggestions for improvement, ask why things work in a certain way, and also it's an opportunity to share with other colleagues outside as well, like product management. This not only helps drive alignment, but it's also paid dividends in breaking down silos between the segments, and the other teams always have something to contribute. Design for delight. So this slide kind of covers most of the key points. So the ilities, as we call it. So we have to design things that are stable, available, scalable, testable. We also have to create benefits that customers care about. It's no good delivering features if you can't articulate the benefit that brings the customer. And that's, it also has to be easy to use. And by doing those things, we look to create positive emotion. So great products deliver not only the benefits that solve the problem with ease, they leave the user with a positive emotion related to that experience. We also try to celebrate customers' successes, big and small, because people remember not what you said or did, but how you made them feel. And lastly, last but one, principle number 8, talk less, design more, code most. So talk is cheap, where there's a lot of talking that happens at Sage, and design flourishes when there is talking, but also we need to encourage learning, testing, and iterating with our customers. Until a customer actually sees something, we have no idea if it's really going to be successful. As you may have noticed in the video earlier, customers love to get involved. And when you incorporate their feedback, they not only feel that you've listened, but that you've truly understood. There are always improvements that can be made, and delivering iteratively as per the previous example and continually co-designing with customers allows us to de-risk development by being confident that we're tackling the right things that are going to make a difference to our customers. The last principle is measure what matters. So we have to ensure that our design performance is measured and driven with the same focus and rigor as you would perhaps revenue and costs. Defining outcomes and setting metrics is important to understand what works and what doesn't. There's no point spending a lot of time designing and building features without having a measure of what success looks like at the end. And of course, defining a metric is only half of the problem. You also have to be able to make sure that you can measure it when the time comes. And we've fallen foul of this in the past, where good metrics have turned out to be unobtainable. Partly due to the implementation of the feature by engineering, which actually isn't their fault, it's rather a gap in our requirements. So now we ensure that when we define a measure, we also put the work into the requirements to provide the way in which that measure is going to be calculated, and it's defined up front. We need to measure frequently, and we need to make sure we understand the impact that we're using. So that covers the 9 guiding principles that we have in experience design. So I thought there's one more thing that I thought I'd come back to. So the size of the teams. So Sage has invested heavily in experience design. So we were a team of 5 in 2013, a team of 17 in 2017. Earlier in 2020, my team was 53 people. We are now recruiting, and by the end of 2021, the team will be 111 people. So Sage is really committed to using experience and design to drive forward our products. And this is just the small business team. There are other teams in Sage of similar sizes. And in the true Steve Jobs fashion, I thought I'd give you just one more thing. So we talked about design thinking earlier, and there's a book that if you want to look at design thinking that I'd recommend, it's called Sprint. And this is written by a guy who used to work for Google Ventures. And it's a process that they would use to, when they went into startups, to assess them and help them move forward. So we set a challenge for the team. And the challenge was use this process, makes a big promise, right? Solve big problems and test new ideas in just 5 days. So we put a group of people together to actually look at a big problem, which was how do we help customers get to the right solution from sage.com. And I'm just going to run a quick video, and I'll let the video speak for itself, but you'll see the results are quite interesting.
The video instantly shows me what it's going to look like on my computer and on my phone, and that really speaks to me.
I see 6 million customers worldwide, so straight away I'm like, right, it's clearly good software.
Visually, far more appealing.
The other site was too busy on information, whereas this is just straight in.
It just, yeah, it doesn't look as kind of stuffy and traditional and complex as I had perceived Sage to be.
I love this. I genuinely really like this a lot.
That appeals to me, the sales dashboard. I like the fact that you can see, I always look for an example of what it'll look like because it has to look user-friendly.
This resonates with me, shall we say. Visually and the information I've got here, it's plain English, it's concise, it tells me what I need to know.
Yeah, those features really speak to me.
There's the kind of wrap up of all of the bits I need, and then it's like, right, do you want this, or do you want this? Yeah, I love that.
Okay, so hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into experience design at Sage, and I have to say I'm extremely privileged to work with a great group of people who are extremely talented. So without them, none of this would be possible, and I should never forget them.
Stuart, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. Really, really excellent. And you covered so much ground, so much of the, well, I'll call it life cycle for want of a better word, that development process. And, you know, so succinctly, that was just amazing. Thank you. Most interesting. If it's okay with you, I'm going to open it up to everyone for questions. And I've unmuted everyone, I think. So if anyone has any questions for Stuart.
Well, Stuart, it's Ian here. That was a great talk, so thank you for that. What I'd like to ask is, in terms of user experience,
Ian, I'm not getting you. You're very, very low.
I think your microphone's up.
Is that better? Is that better? Sorry about that.
Better. So the design thing that would come into play there about where the microphone was.
Well, on my desktop, I've got like 4 computers, 4 monitors, 2 keyboards, 3 mice. Sometimes it gets a bit confusing. Anyway, back to, in terms of user experience, some people say it's got 2 components. It's got like a usability part and a user experience part. How have Sage gone about ongoing measuring user experience? Because sometimes it's quite hard to capture user experience.
Yeah, we have a system of measures. I didn't put them into the slide because it was starting to get a little bit busy, but there are 14 metrics that we try and measure across user experience. So some of them are quite well known. So SUS is quite a long-standing measure, which is a system usability score, and it measures on 10 questions and gives you a number between 1 and 100. And if you get 86, that's deemed to be reasonable. If you're less than 86, you've got work to do. And the questions are about how easy a customer finds to do a task, or how easy it was to get started, whether they found the system was insightful, those kind of questions. We also look at things like Net Promoter Score. So do customers recommend the product that we produce? And if they recommend it, then the chances are, and I don't know if you know about Net Promoter, but the question for Net Promoter is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this product or service to friends and family?
Okay.
So it's a really kind of personal question about, would you put your reputation on the line to recommend this product? And it's quite a harsh measure. So if you don't score somebody 9 and 10, then your score isn't worth a lot to them. And if you score between 0 and 6, you're actually creating negative points. So the way the score is calculated is the percentage of 9s and 10s less the percentage of 0 to 6s. If you do 7 and 8, you don't count. So the NPS measure for a company like Apple is high 70s. The NPS measure for Sage Accounting at the moment is probably about 30, and we need to work on it. I am aware of one product I looked at once that had an NPS of minus 100. Wow. Which basically meant nobody would recommend it. So that didn't last for long, clearly, because we fixed those things and we started to work on it. But NPS is used as a metric. Customer satisfaction scores as well. So we do quite a lot of surveys with customers in terms of CSAT. Active use is one of my favorites. So when we produce a feature, how many people are actively engaging with that feature? Because if you've built something and that you're using it, there's a reason why. Either it doesn't meet their need, or they can't find it, or they never wanted it in the first place. So measuring those things is important to me and something that we strive to do. But I hope that's a bit of a flavour of some of the things, but there's 14 in total, I'm afraid, off the top of my head.
Thanks.
It's a fairly brutal scoring, Stuart, I have to say.
And NPS, Net Promoter, really is. It is something which is used all over it's not just it's not a UX score in particular. It is about recommendation.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, sure. I'm sure it focuses the mind.
It does. Unfortunately, when you do things like ask people, so you gave us an 8, what would it take to give us a 9 or 10 next time? Sometimes they come back with, I never give 9 or 10.
Yeah.
At which point, what do you do? And there are also cases when, if you read some of the research about it, there are cases when it's like the right thing to do with somebody who's scoring 2 or 3 is recommend the competition, because
Yeah.
you may not be able to make them happy.
Uh-huh.
They may have the wrong product for them. So
Mm.
not every customer is a customer you can convert, and maybe the right
Yeah.
thing to do to make them happy is to recommend an alternative product.
Okay. Excellent. Ad, you get your hand up?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see me. Just had to think that if you want an example of a bad user interface, we're using.
No, I think that's actually a bad user. The interface is fine. It's my incompetence. Although I have just tried to make you a panelist. All I've done is lose you completely.
No, he's now a panelist. So I must admit, when I spent some time this afternoon with one of the colleagues on the call, actually trying to work out go to webinar, and it's not the easiest conferencing software in the world to get to grips with.
Ad, your question.
I saw a question in the chat that says, what software development process supports such design thinking best? And in terms of, we use Agile in Sage, so breaking things into sprints, breaking them into iterations. So I don't think there's necessarily one, certainly not a waterfall development cycle wouldn't really help, because you're trying to react to customers as you go. And the smaller the iteration, the less risk there is that you're doing the wrong thing, and the more you can learn. So in some of the things we've delivered over the years, we did a piece of work around reviewing how the profit and loss worked, which was covered in that last video actually. And we knew from research we'd done probably what 30–40% of that feature should look like, but we didn't have a clue about the last piece. So we actually shipped the first piece. We started work on the next piece because we knew what it was, and then the customer feedback starts to flow, and they shape the next 2 or 3 sprints afterwards. So we don't like to design everything up front. We like to have a direction of travel, because sometimes that will affect how you build something, but certainly big scale, 3–4 month projects to design something is not what we do. It's too expensive, and it doesn't give you what you want.
Yeah.
Diversity in your team. So if I go back to 2013, the team at that point was largely male, and over between 2013 and 2017, we actually managed to rebalance that quite well. For me, it's important that we do have diversity in the team. We get different thinking, different styles, different experiences. The actual spread, as you saw from the video of people, is different backgrounds. Unfortunately, Alan, who was the older gentleman in the video, isn't with us anymore, but he brought a very different view. As an academic, he had been in user research for many years, and the team, when we brought him on the team, the 2 guys that hired him had actually studied his work at uni. So it was a bit like meeting a god as far as they were concerned. They'd studied all of his papers, and they were delighted when he came on board. So up until the point we started the latest round of recruitment, we were pretty much at 50–50. We've just brought in about 23 people, and that started to lean us more towards a male bias. But we've got another 25–30 roles to go. So we'll start to look at that as well. I don't actively seek diversity in recruitment. We have to recruit the best people that are available at the time, but we've been lucky in that it has worked out well for us from that in recent times.
Thanks, Stuart. I'm sure that you're doing yourself down, and you've got your adverts right and the language in your adverts, and I'm sure that encourages diversity in recruitment. Yeah,
I mean, if I think back to we've swung more towards male candidates recently in terms of successful, but the diversity within that from a background perspective is massive. So we're diversifying in different ways.
Yeah, no, indeed. Tim, have you got your hand up?
Yes. Hey, Stuart, quick question. So, it's amazing to see the difference between 2013 and 2017 in terms of tools, processes, and technique. What's exciting to me is, where do you think we're going to be in another 4 years? I know it's hard to predict the future, but where is experience design going in terms of the future?
So I think from a future perspective, we need to get more into the customers than we are at the moment. So at present, we don't, we do as much as we can, but there's much more that we can do. We need to look at how we think across, from a Sage perspective, how we think more across the segment. So right now, if you look at our marketing and you look at our products, our website, and what we actually build is different products. So we build a payroll product, we build an accounting product, we build a HR product, we build auto entry, which kind of sits in its own category. And what we really want customers to do is to buy into Sage. So from an experience design perspective, one of our jobs is to get those products to look and feel similar. So they won't be exactly the same because they're solving different problems, but we should certainly be trying to design a common experience across them and also bring them together so the customer just buys a Sage subscription. So I think that's one of the big challenges for us in terms of how we can help the business navigate that and how we can help our customers get better insight or feel more connected to Sage as a company.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Any last questions for Stuart? Okay.
Can I ask a question? In terms of accessibility, was that quite easy to recruit people who had the necessary skills? Because I know there's lots of legislation and things to take into account. So is that factored into the design process?
So accessibility is something that we are starting to take very seriously. And in fact, we've hired recently a very talented gentleman who understands more than I will ever understand about WCAG and the relative guidelines. HMRC are actually quite aggressive in pushing software designers to take accessibility more seriously. And the new design system that I touched on is fully WCAG compliant as well. So it will take us a while to get those rolled out across all the applications. And you're right, hiring people that are skilled in that area is a challenge. And that's to my point before, we were very lucky when we were interviewing that somebody came to us and said, hey, I can do these things. And his resume was brilliant and his portfolio was really good. So he joined us about 3 weeks ago. So hopefully we'll start to see some differences from him. And we'll look to recruit more to support that as we go on.
Excellent.
Well, listen, Stuart, thank you very much. It's been a excellent talk and much better than the AGM, has to be said, although the bar wasn't particularly high. Thanks all very much for your questions and Stuart for answering them so honestly and fully. If we could do a virtual show of appreciation, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks awful much. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for the AGM. The minutes will come out in due course. Thanks and be safe. Have a good night. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.